Have you ever settled in to watch a classic Western and marveled at the Stagecoach? Hollywood paints a picture of thrilling adventures, noble heroes, and perhaps a hint of romance, all set against sweeping, majestic backdrops. Take John Wayne in Stagecoach, for example, leading a diverse group through danger and emerging transformed. But what if I told you that the Hollywood depiction of the Stagecoach is mostly a fantasy? The reality was far from the exciting and sometimes comfortable cinematic journeys we see on screen. Today, we're peeling back the layers of celluloid romance to uncover the brutal, uncomfortable, and downright dangerous truth of 19th century stagecoach travel. What was it really like to be a passenger? You'll discover a world of grinding misery, constant discomfort, and threats that went far beyond dramatic shootouts. By the end of this video, you'll gain a much deeper appreciation for what our ancestors endured, and why the true story of the stagecoach is even more compelling than the myths we've been told. If you're a fan of authentic Old West history and want more content that digs into the realities of the past, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next journey into history. Part 1. Hollywood's frontier fantasy versus the brutal reality. When we think of stagecoaches, iconic scenes from films like John Ford's Stagecoach spring to mind. We see distinct characters thrown together on an adventurous ride. The coach itself often portrayed as reasonably spacious, allowing for conversation and drama. These cinematic journeys promise excitement, daring chases, dramatic robberies, or heroic sacrifices. The stagecoach becomes a moving platform for human drama. However, these films rarely capture the persistent suffering that characterized the experience for most 19th century stagecoach passengers. Hollywood revels in sudden ambush, neglecting to portray the chronic misery brought on by appalling road conditions, crippling discomfort, pervasive filth, and the constant fear of disease and debilitating accidents. This romanticization of stagecoach travel helped build the myth of a young, adventurous nation, turning a symbol of arduous expansion into a representation of rugged individualism. The actual experience, however, was something that modern individuals would find nearly unbearable. Part 2. The Concorde coach designed for endurance, not comfort. The most iconic of stagecoaches is the Concorde coach. Developed in the 1820s, its builders aimed to create a comfortable, elegant stagecoach. Innovations such as leather thoroughbrace suspension allowed the coach body to swing, providing a smoother ride than older wagons on better roads. Remarkably, this robust design remained largely unchanged for nearly 75 years. However, comfort was a highly relative term, especially on the primitive trails of the American West. Concorde coaches typically accommodated 6, 9, or 12 passengers inside, but often packed in more, with extras clinging to the roof or hanging precariously to the sides. The interior was shockingly cramped, just over 4 feet wide and about 4.5 feet high. Passengers often found themselves squished shoulder to shoulder with complete strangers. Mark Twain described how the lurching motion of the coach would mix passengers together, causing them to end up in a tangled pile at the forward end, or practically stand on our heads. While the leather thoroughbraces improved the ride somewhat, they weren't a panacea. Twain recounted an instance where one broke under the weight of heavy mailbags. A traveler recalled the jarring experience of bouncing from the hard seat to the roof and then against the sides of the wagon, describing it as no joke. And in Western models, glass windows were replaced with roll-down leather or canvas curtains, since the rugged terrain shattered glass all too easily, resulting in less protection from dust, rain, and harsh temperatures. Mail, a primary cargo, often cluttered the interior, further minimizing space. Ultimately, the Concorde coach relied heavily on the sheer toughness of those who traveled in it. Part 3. The torturous truth of the journey. The romantic notion of a stagecoach gliding through picturesque landscapes quickly dissipates upon confronting the journey itself. The primary culprit? The abysmal state of 19th century roads, which transformed every trip into a grueling ordeal. Roads in the West were often little more than dirt paths, susceptible to the elements, ruts, mud, dust, and deep snow. One notorious type was the corduroy road, composed of logs laid side by side across marshy ground. Charles Dickens described the experience of riding such roads as jarring enough to have dislocated all the bones. Progress was agonizingly slow, averaging only 5 to 12 miles per hour, sometimes reducing to a mere 7 to 12 miles per day. A journey that takes hours by car today could stretch into 3 full days by stagecoach. The constant violent motion led to exhaustion and bruising, exacerbated by the severe overcrowding. Passengers were packed tightly in the small interior compartment, with mailbags becoming unwelcome projectiles during the ride. Escape from the environment was nearly impossible. Travelers faced extreme heat, blinding dust, piercing cold, relentless rain, and the constant torment of insects. Long-distance stage travel was unyielding, often extending for 22 days, both day and night. A journey from St. Louis to San Francisco, for instance, could take around 25 grueling days, with poor food and no rest. Stops were brief, primarily for changing horses. At times, passengers were even compelled to walk to relieve the fatigued teams or help push coaches up hills. The journey became a relentless, multisensory assault, a brutal test of both body and mind. Part 4. The stops. Way stations and limited relief. Brief halts at way stations offered little genuine relief. Swing stations provided fresh horses for the next leg of the journey, while more substantial home stations were often private residences or small inns serving meals and basic lodging. Even here, respite was fleeting. For instance, Butterfield overland mail stages made stops lasting no longer than 10 minutes. The quality of station grub was a common complaint. Tavern owners exploited captive passengers, serving poor quality food and charging whatever they wanted, Granville Stewart lamented. Each meal was the same. Typical fare included bacon, ham, and the dreaded dried apple pie. Some passengers, seeking to avoid unpleasant meals, carried their own provisions. Hygiene was a significant concern. Travelers were often appalled at the conditions, especially in a time when Victorians were shocked by the lack of cleanliness in their surroundings. One driver recounted a station cook petting animals and then immediately plunging her hands into the biscuit dough. When a passenger complained about the dirt, the proprietor retorted that everyone should eat a peck of dirt, to which the traveler wryly replied that he didn't wish to consume his entire portion at one meal. Lodging was equally crude. Women were crammed into one room, while men slept 2 to a bed, sometimes even 3 or 4 to a bed with strangers. These way stations only added another layer to the journey's brutality. The unspoken horrors. Sanitation and sickness beyond visible discomfort lay the horrors of basic human needs and disease. The call of nature turned into a challenge with no onboard toilets. Relief was sought roadside with little privacy afforded to travelers. Personal hygiene was nearly impossible. Way station facilities were primitive. One traveler reported managing hygiene at a horse trough. One inn provided a shared cup, towel, and toothbrush, which hardly sufficed given the conditions. Travelers faced the harsh reality of filthy conditions, often battling infestations of fleas, lice, and bedbugs from cohabiting with strangers who wouldn't have bathed in months. The gravest consequence of all was rampant disease. The number one killer on the trails was disease, and serious illnesses which claimed the lives of 9 out of 10 pioneers undertaking overland journeys. Cholera, the unseen destroyer, spread through contaminated water, often leading to death from dehydration within 24 hours. Dysentery caused bloody diarrhea and fever, while typhoid fever, measles, influenza, tuberculosis, and mountain fever plagued travelers as well. The cramped conditions of coaches and unsanitary stations were ideal breeding grounds for illness. Without effective medical aid, travelers often relied on inadequate home remedies, as the understanding of germ theory was limited. People misattributed diseases to miasmas or bad air rather than pathogens. Part 6. The real perils of the prairie. More than Hollywood gunfights. While Hollywood fixates on thrilling gunfights, the most frequent and often deadliest perils were mundane accidents, mechanical failures, and the grim reality of robbery. Accidents were alarmingly common: wheels falling off, horses bolting, and brakes failing. Coaches frequently broke down, leaving passengers stranded on deserted roads due to poor conditions, malfunctioning parts, and driver error, which could stem from speeding or intoxication. Overturning a coach was perhaps the most dangerous aspect of stage travel. High centers of gravity made these vehicles prone to flipping. The consequences were often severe injuries or fatalities. Stagecoach robberies were also prevalent. Wells Fargo coaches were robbed nearly 350 times between 1870 and 1884. Robbers would strike during slow moments, and while they often avoided violence, it did happen. The principal targets were treasure boxes and mail pouches. Infamous robbers like Black Bart became known for their politeness. Others were what you might consider more hardened ruffians. Hollywood's portrayal of Native American encounters was equally distorted, often depicting relentless attacks by remorseless villains. While attacks did occur and could be terrifying, the underlying motivations were often complex, stemming from the need for resources or retaliation against encroachment. Losses primarily included livestock and property rather than passenger casualties. The frequency and nature of these attacks were often exaggerated, and crimes typically attributed to Native Americans were sometimes perpetrated by white men in disguise. Understanding the historical context of dispossession is crucial in distinguishing it from simplistic savage Indian tropes. Part 7. The human element. Passengers and crew. The human element. The psyche of passengers, social dynamics, and the lives of crew members formed a crucial part of this brutal reality. The mental and emotional toll that travel took on passengers was immense. Acute fear, mind-numbing boredom, and profound exhaustion weighed heavily on them. The constant awareness of their precarious situation loomed large. Interspersed with the terror were long stretches of monotony. Overarching all was the pervasive weariness stemming from continuous travel, lack of sleep, poor food, and inevitable stress. Forced intimacy in such close quarters could lead to friction and conflict. Stage lines like Wells Fargo had strict rules: share your liquor, spit with the wind, don't snore on fellow passengers, act chivalrously toward women, and stay calm during emergencies. Notably, the rules emphasized don't discuss politics or religion, avoid profane language, and don't point out sites of previous Indian attacks or stagecoach robberies. These regulations indicated the potential for chaos. Drivers, often called whips, were revered for their skills in handling horse teams over treacherous terrain, but their jobs were fraught with danger, long hours, and often poor pay. The shotgun messengers who protected valuable freight undertook an exceedingly hazardous role, often becoming the first targets during robberies. These men bore disproportionate risks for modest rewards. Passengers spanned a diverse cross-section of society: soldiers, clergy, scholars, servants, and noblemen among them. While mail and money constituted the primary cargo for stage lines, passengers represented additional revenue. People traveled for various reasons: business, migration, health, or simply adventure. The journey by stagecoach in 19th century America stands as a stark example of the profound gap between popular myth and historical reality. Hollywood presented an exhilarating, romantic depiction, but the historical record reveals an experience that was overwhelmingly brutal, profoundly uncomfortable, perilous, and shockingly unsanitary. The real narrative is one of incredible human endurance by passengers and crew who faced unimaginable conditions. The sheer grit required to travel by stagecoach makes the westward expansion far more impressive than any sanitized Hollywood version. Understanding the true hardships fosters a deeper respect for the past. The brutal reality represents a more compelling human story than the superficial glamour of the movies. The enduring Hollywood myth underscores the power of cinema to shape our perceptions. Yet embracing the brutal reality offers a more profound understanding of the determination or desperate necessity that compelled individuals to undertake such arduous journeys. The decision to travel by stagecoach highlights the powerful motivations, whether seeking a better life, fulfilling duty, pursuing fortune, or lacking viable alternatives, that drove people to brave the wilds of the American West, the real Wild West experienced from a lurching, overcrowded, and perilous Stagecoach was far wilder and more brutal than any depiction in film could capture. So, what part of this brutal reality of stagecoach travel surprised you the most? Was it the cramped conditions, the treacherous roads, the constant threat of disease, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this journey into the authentic Old West enlightening, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history. Thank you for watching.